Hi, I'm Ted Syrett, and I'm recording this little memorial to my Aunt Shirley Fenton, who passed away about a year ago. My earliest memories are from when I was a kid in Toronto, and she occasionally would relieve my mother of the burden of me by taking me down to the beach at the foot of Silver Birch Avenue. But I didn't really know her that well until both of us came out to California. We made that California trip, not via Route 66, and she preceded me by about a year. I came out to do grad work at Stanford in 1963. I found her here. She was in an apartment in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. She had not known that that was a bad neighborhood when she arrived, because she didn't know San Francisco at all at that time. She was delighted to find that there was all this fresh produce in the stores out here. She loved to cook and made killer salads. She put avocados in everything. I was very gratified when she would invite me to dinner because I was a starving student. We began going to jazz clubs up in North Beach. At that time there was the Jazz Workshop and a place called Basin Street West, where Cal Tjader had a regular gig. We also took a bus trip down to Monterey for the jazz festival down there. We were tickled to see Vince Guaraldi coming out of a restaurant. His handlebar mustache was unmistakable. So later on, I was more likely to be found going to places like the Fillmore Auditorium and the Avalon Ballroom, and I was not inviting my aunt along. I was able to subscribe to the San Francisco Symphony, and she subscribed to the opera, and I was never much of an opera buff, but Susan and I had this subscription to the symphony, and when Susan couldn't make it, Susie would fill in, or sometimes I was the one who couldn't make it, and Susan and Susie would go to the symphony together. Later on, she moved to a nicer neighborhood and eventually got married to a gentleman named Al Fenton. And so we began reciprocating, hosting Christmas dinners for each other, and they always featured Al's killer cocktails. Eventually, they got a house. They bought a house in South San Francisco. The house that they eventually bought, Al and Susie could go quickly over to the coast and visit their favorite beachside restaurant. Sometimes Susan and I would go with them, and so we'd enjoy an evening out together that way, and we didn't have to inflict music on Al because he was no kind of music buff. We had a very important episode musically later on when in 1999, after Al Fenton had passed away, the San Francisco Opera staged the full Wagner Ring Cycle. And though no opera buff in general, I couldn't miss the full Wagner Ring Cycle. So we got tickets, and Susie and I attended, and we all had an uplifting experience, shall I say. Susie never lost her love of jazz. She really always subscribed to the local jazz radio station, and it was playing on her little radio in her kitchen every time I would go up to visit her later in her life. So I think that somewhere, either in an afterlife or in our imagination, she is listening to Duke Ellington, and he is telling her that he loves her madly.